So we had a great question recently. It's very specific. What's the difference between spiritual accompaniment, spiritual counseling, spiritual direction, or spiritual coaching? And I love these kind of questions because it's an area that I work in and I'm passionate about and I think about a lot. So it's a huge question. I mean, the answer is unique. I'm sure there's lots of various answers, but for me, spiritual accompaniment is the key. I think somebody put it, the core of all the different areas is that we are an active agent of love, which I think it's a lovely way of putting it in all, whether we're coaching, accompanying, directing. Um, we're an active agent of love. So there is an underlying core to to all the various approaches, but they are distinctly different. So for me, spiritual accompaniment is walking with somebody, helping to introduce them to the spiritual field. And there are various skills involved in that. I'm not sure how much of a role itself it is, but I can accompany someone on their spiritual journey. So my job is to, practice introducing them to the field, helping to them to connect to that. Spiritual counseling is quite different because again, the counseling element brings in, well, it's working on somebody's life story. And in working on their story, we then bring that story to the field, the spiritual field again. So, where's the connectors between the person who's struggling in their everyday life and how do we help them to bring that to the spiritual field? So that's quite a distinct difference than just spiritual accompaniment, although it uses a lot of the same skills, although it includes the counseling element. And then linking the personal to the spiritual. And then there's things like spiritual direction. Now, spiritual direction is a more old-fashioned term. Um, I remember when I went to my first spiritual directors association in Ireland, AISCA, AISGA, the All Ireland Spiritual Associate Directors Association. I think I was the youngest there by about 30 years. But, you know, um, I don't like the word direction myself because, again, that's very, it tends to be more religious based in the sense of I'm directing you within a particular tradition. And at the heart of spiritual direction, is what they call theological reflection. So there's a very clear uh, introduction of the theology into the process. So it's not just like the counseling where it's about your life story and then bringing that to the spiritual field. It also includes theology of whatever faith path is within the domain and being directed. Um, and then lastly, spiritual coaching is a term. I'm sure we can make up more. And again, what's spiritual coaching? What's the coaching model? So the coaching model tends to be quite diffuse, I feel, in many ways. Again, it can be quite directive. Um, for me, spiritual accompaniment and those skills are quite non-directive in many ways. The deep listening into spirit, modeling that for the client. But spiritual coaching probably for me has more directivity in it. It's not spiritual direction. It wouldn't necessarily have the theological element, but it's probably more exercise based, following a path, looking at outcomes, let's follow a course in miracles and see what the outcomes are. Let's do the 21 spiritual exercises. Let's, work on such and such a system. So coaching tends to work within systems. So I think it tends to be more systematic and output orientated and then measurable, which, is all fine. So so for me, they're all the different models are distinct differences all within this idea of spiritual work with others. And there is obviously a place to be really non-directive and model deep listening, and at times to be directive where required. The theology of a faith tradition or path doesn't come in unless it's spiritual direction. That's what gives it the direction piece. If it's coaching, it tends to be systematic. There's some sort of system we're following within somebody's system, some sort of model. And then obviously within the counseling field, it's just connecting it into your life, everyday challenges. And how can we bring my everyday experience to a wider spiritual awareness? And that's, I think, my favorite place to be. And then, of course, the accompaniment skills are really important. How do I introduce somebody to the field? What sort of skills are required for that? So that's my immediate and very basic take on the distinction within spirituality in those various areas. I hope it helps. Thank you.